On to round 2 of the NFL playoffs. We enter the divisional round this coming weekend. Here at Club Fantasy, we're going to be breaking down all of the DFS Showdown slates on DraftKings here on Oh Captain, My Captain. And this video is going to focus on the Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Stay tuned. Oh, Captain, my Captain. This is Club Fantasy's DFS Showdown slate videos. I am your host, Joshua Hudson. You can find me at the One Hudsonian over across the socials. My co-host, our DFS expert here at Club Fantasy, taking a small little hiatus from his ski trip this week to give you all of the DFS advice you need, Mr. Austin Amandolia. Austin, how you doing, man? Thank you.
Doing great.
Thanks for making time for me and the people here to talk some DFS.
Yeah, now you get to see the level of commitment I have to DFS for you all. No, things are good. Shins are a little sore.
Cozy.
If you've ever
so
skied.
Cozy right now.
Yes, very cozy. Nice little fireplace nearby.
There you go. Hey, when you're in the snow, you need the fireplace. Let me tell you. Wouldn't know much about that living in Florida, although it is bordering on freezing temperatures in Florida. And by freezing, I mean like 50 degrees. Because that's how Floridians operate, right? Anyway, we're going to be breaking down the Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Austin, tell the good people at home listening to this how they can play these showdown slates against us at Club Fantasy.
Yes, we have a league on DraftKings. If you follow the link in the show description, you can join that league. We will have contests for all 4 games this weekend. There will also be a Saturday slate contest and a Sunday slate contest. So last week we had 9 ways for you to take our money. This week you have 6 ways to take our money.
Let's rephrase that. Try to take our money, because of those 9 contests, 5 of them were won from the 2 people on here, and 4 of them came from this guy. Okay, just throwing that out there. Come get some, baby. Come get some. All right. Real quick, before we get into everything, be sure to check out our sister site, Women of Fantasy Football, and their partnership with Trophy Smack. Head over to trophysmack.com/WOFF to get all of your achievement-based needs. You won your fantasy football championship and you're spending some of that money on DFS. That's great. Spend a little bit more to get yourself some championship swag. They have championship belts, trophies, rings, even wall smack to decorate your office, hallways, kids' rooms, you name it, they got it. It is all customizable, and you can get it all at trophysmack.com/WOFF. From now until January 31st, use code WOFF, WOFF, at checkout. With the purchase of a trophy or a belt, get yourself a ring for free. That's right. Free bling. Just add it to your cart with a trophy or a belt, and you get it for free using promo code WOFF, WOFF. All the commissions we gain from using this direct link goes directly towards supporting women in sports. We have 4 women that we're sending to the Super Bowl this year to cover the big game. We want to be able to give them more than just the passes. So anything you guys get from trophysmack.com/WOFF, that's WOFF, all that helps them out while they're there. We'd greatly appreciate the help. All right, let's get into it. Our first section, Captain Chalk. These are the chalky captains that everybody is likely to pick because they know the name and they're just that damn good. Austin, we joked a little bit pre-show. I didn't realize Nico Collins had as good of a game as he did in the wild card round because it was such a defensive fest with INT returns and all those turnovers. Nico straight up balled out. First matchup against Kansas City earlier this year, he had 10 targets. Why do you see him as the chalky captain in this matchup?
Yeah, I think in large part it's because people are going to shy away from putting a Kansas City player in their captain spot because, let's be honest, they haven't really had a clear target hog all year long. whenever you're looking at the captain spot, you're looking for someone who's going to get 9 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown. It's been hard for a Kansas City pass catcher to get there at all this year. And Mahomes hasn't been getting like those 300 passing yard games, those 2 or 3 touchdown games. And so I could just see it happening because people are like, well, I don't really think any Kansas City player outscores Nico Collins. So let's go that direction. Now, I think there are lots of interesting ways to play this with the Kansas City side, but I do see Nico Collins as a potential way to get different as well, even though he will be chalky because it's this weird thing where like he's chalky, but they're the underdogs. So people may not want to play him either. It's a little bit both hand here because they're 8-point underdogs in this matchup. But Nico Collins, he's just going to get so much target volume that it's worth the play.
Yeah, especially with all the injuries at the wide receiver position that Houston has dealt with. I don't think it's unfathomable for Nico to end up with like a 15, 16 target game because, I mean, who else are they throwing to? I mean, Dalton Schultz caught a touchdown in that first game, but there's not much outside of Mixon and Collins really left on this offense for CJ Stroud to operate with. So, yeah, I like the call. I like the call. Our next section here is the Mutineer. These are going to be your contrarian captain choices that offer a little bit of variety and upside in your larger tournaments. We talked about Houston being the underdog. Let's talk about the favorites here. You've got a couple of Kansas City Chiefs here. Let's start with the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think Patrick Mahomes, like he'll be decently rostered, but I could see him getting a little bit overshadowed because he hasn't had clear upside this year. Like people that have been playing fantasy football this year know that Patrick Mahomes hasn't been a fantasy football star the way he has been in years past. He's still been an NFL star. But I could see this being a really low scoring game, and I could see it being done without like defensive touchdowns, without a lot of rushing touchdowns. And so if Patrick Mahomes, if he throws 2 touchdowns and rushes for a touchdown, and this is a 21-17 slogfest, it's fairly low scoring, he could easily be optimal in this lineup. If this game does hit the ceiling, Mahomes is known to spread the ball around, and so he could throw a touchdown to 3 or 4 different pass catchers. None of his pass catchers then become optimal, and he is because he soaks up all of the touchdown volume. So it works for a couple of different types of game scripts and ways that this game could go. And I could see people overlooking it just because Mahomes hasn't been that great. He hasn't had a ceiling performance recently. But it's the playoffs. It's where Mahomes and where Travis Kelce really shine.
Yeah, before we talk about Travis Kelce here as one of these contrarian captains, I want to go back to really a lot of our previous episodes of Oh Captain, My Captain, when we're specifically talking about the quarterback position as a captain, especially with teams where, like we talked about it last week, Bo Nix, right? Like Bo Nix spreads the football around a ton. It's very hard to kind of pin down which target in a given week is going to have that true upside where they break out and truly show that, hey, that's the captain right there. Patrick Mahomes is kind of in that same scenario. Like one week it's Xavier Worthy. One week Juju Smith-Schuster gets involved. One week it's DeAndre Hopkins. One week it's Noah Gray. One week it's Travis Kelce. So putting Mahomes in that captain spot makes, to me, a lot more sense when you're looking at the grand scale of it, right? Let's pivot over to Travis Kelce a little bit. Obviously not the greatest Travis Kelce season by any means, but he's still one of the most trusted options that Patrick Mahomes has. And this is the playoffs. This is where Travis Kelce comes to play. So why do we like Kelce here as a contrarian choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it. Like they are going to utilize him heavily in the playoffs. They did it last year as well. Kansas City has kind of become this team where it's like they're in the playoffs by like, I don't know, week 13, 14. They don't need to use their start. It's kind of like NBA style where it's like some NBA teams don't need to play their starters every night to make the playoffs, but then they play them in the playoffs because that's how they win. And I see that happening here as well. Let's keep in mind, Kansas City effectively is coming off of 2 bye weeks back to back because they rested all their starters in week 18. They got the number 1 seed. So they've had 3 weeks to rest. We're going to get a fresh Travis Kelce, and we're going to get classic old Andy Reid shenanigans with an extra week to prepare for a matchup. So I just foresee Travis Kelce being a focal point of this offense. He always is, and we can go on a different rant at some time about how important he is to this offense, regardless of the amount of catches he's gotten. But I think especially in this matchup, he will get the target volume that we typically expect from him.
Yeah, he draws so much coverage, defensive attention that I mean, it opens up a lot of room for guys like Xavier Worthy and someone else in our next section. So speaking of, let's move on to that next section. These are the first mates because every captain needs a reliable crew, the standouts that help maximize your lineups. Look, if defenses are going to pay a lot of attention to Travis Kelce, they might be forgetting about Hollywood Brown, who did make his return to the Kansas City lineup. I believe it was week 17 or 18, one of those two. Not heavily involved, but they were definitely scheming him some plays, trying to get him to a point where he can be very effective in his offense. What do you see from him in his first playoff game here with Kansas City?
Yeah, it's essentially what you just named, that as he came back, they clearly were working to get him involved in the offense. Whenever Houston and Kansas City played last time, Hollywood Brown had 8 targets. He only caught 5 of those. That may have been his first game back, because I remember those first couple of games back, like there was a little bit of a lack of chemistry between Mahomes and Brown because they hadn't played together in so long. But as the season goes on, and now they've had, again, 3 weeks to just prep and work together and get that chemistry going, I foresee him being a big part of the offense. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins kind of slow down as the season has worn down. And I feel like Hollywood Brown has the chance to kind of take on that Rashee Rice role that we were seeing earlier in the year where he's getting that high volume.
So this next guy here, I want to give a quick shout out to Ryan Weiss, my co-host here on Club Fantasy with no punt intended, who was dragging you in our DFS chat about how you hate kickers. And he purposely puts them in his showdown lineups to spite you. Well, here's a little, we'll call it love for Ryan, because you got Kaimi Fairbairn in this section here, the Houston kicker. Why are we going the route of a kicker this week, Austin?
Yeah, and actually the funny thing about this is I put Kaimi Fairbairn, but the reason I put Kaimi Fairbairn is I want to put a Houston player in here. I really just want to talk about both kickers, right? Like,
okay,
both Fairbairn and Harrison Butker have the potential to score 10 to 15 fantasy points. And especially because I foresee this game hitting the under. These are 2 pretty tough defenses. It could end up being a slog fest very easily, and it could just come down to the kickers. At that point, like, there are some players on both of these teams that I'm like, they probably don't hit 10 points. Like Xavier Hutchinson probably doesn't hit 10 fantasy points. Gosh, who was I thinking of? Justin Watson on the Kansas City side probably doesn't hit 10 points. So I would rather play one of the kickers instead, who have actually that upside. And we've seen both of these offense struggle. They move the ball down the field, but then they struggle as they get close, have to kick field goals.
So I want to bring this up because I feel like it could fit in either this section or even the follow-up. But, you know, you mentioned this being sort of like a defensive slugfest. I mean, obviously we saw Houston's defense come out firing on all cylinders last week against the Chargers. You know, Kansas City gave Houston all kinds of fits in the first meeting. CJ Stroud throws 2 interceptions. Do we think either of these defenses could potentially be viable? I know you typically shy away from them because ultimately they need to score a touchdown in a given week to show any level of, you know, lineup maximization.
Yeah, I think if there was a defense that's viable, it's Kansas City, because I just don't see Mahomes giving up the type of interception that would lead to a touchdown. Like, he might actually throw an interception because he is human. He does make mistakes, but he usually doesn't make catastrophic mistakes where it like leads to a pick six like that. Kansas City, I think their defense could be interesting, but I do think that Houston does enough on offense that it also it still would not like be something I'm looking to do a ton. But there's definitely like I would do it a time or two, but not leaning too heavily into it.
That makes sense. All right, next section here is going to be the deck scrubbers. These are the cheaper punt plays that can make a break or lineup based on one play and or limited opportunity. Noah Gray has been a thorn in Travis Kelce manager sides all season long. Only fair that you would name him in the same video that you also talk about Travis Kelce.
Yes, and part of the thing that I want to touch on here is I think playing them both is an interesting way to get different, because people are going to think, oh, if I'm playing Noah Gray, he's probably stealing touches from Travis Kelce, which he might be, but they can also both get there, because I could see a scenario where Travis Kelce, utilized heavily in the first quarter, gets like 5 catches and a touchdown right away. And then Houston's like, okay, we got to pay attention to Travis Kelce. Well, then the second quarter comes and Noah Gray all of a sudden is getting wide open down the field because everybody's focused on Kelce. So I think that people will avoid playing both of them. And so it is a game theory move as well, that to play both of those tight ends, because people have the association you named. Noah Gray is vulturing all of these touchdowns from Travis Kelce.
That makes sense. We haven't named a ton of Houston Texans options here. Let's talk about John Mechie. I mean, we mentioned Nico and kind of being like the sole option there, but Mechie been getting a little involved here the last month or so of the season.
Yeah, and he particularly got involved last week, which is what caught my attention. When they were in 3 receiver sets, Mechie was in the lineup ahead of Xavier Hutchinson more times than not, and he ended up getting 8 targets. So it's really a thing where he's getting the snap share and the target share. So if you're playing like a 4-2 build, if you're saying like Houston keeps it close, and so I don't want to do a full-on Kansas City onslaught, I like John Mechie as a punt play, but also like, he caught 5 catches for, I think, at least 50 yards last week. If he has a touchdown onto that, that's a pretty solid fantasy outing for a guy at his price point.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, one more time. If you hit the link in the description of the video that you're watching on YouTube or listening to on your favorite podcast network, you can play these showdown slates against us here at Club Fantasy. Hop over to DraftKings, fill out your lineup, come take our money, or at least try to. No guarantees. All right, our final section, the Kraken. These are going to be the lineup traps that sink the ship. It's always enjoyable to me when we throw water on Juju Smith-Schuster. So we got to start there, Austin.
Yeah, I forgot about this. I shouldn't have done this to you. I shouldn't have given this to you, because I remember we had a lot of conversations about Juju Smith-Schuster last year. Yeah, no, it's funny. Earlier in the show, you were like, oh yeah, sometimes Mahomes will throw to Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm like, not anymore. Not this year. It's over with for Juju Smith-Schuster, which is really sad. I did enjoy him as a player. But I think he could get the Jahan Dotson treatment, where he maybe gets 2 targets and lucks into a touchdown, but I am not betting on that. Like, you could maybe convince me in a super large field tournament it's worth the shot. I don't feel comfortable playing Juju Smith-Schuster. He's just not on the field enough. It's going to be D-Hop. It's going to be Hollywood Brown, Travis Kelce, Noah Gray. Don't forget, Kansas City plays a lot of heavy personnel. They put a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets out there. And so that means that there's less receivers on the field at a time. I just would rather go elsewhere.
Makes sense. All right, and your next one here, the backup Houston running backs. You didn't want to just call out Dameon Pierce? I mean, what the hell, man?
Well, Dare Ogunbowale actually had a touch last week, so I had to throw it out there for him as well. Yeah, both of them. Don't play either of them. They get basically no touches. It's all Joe Mixon. Don't try and get cute with the backup Houston running backs.
Yeah, save salary with big old zeros. Not always the fun part, That's all. All right, one more time. Head over to trophysmack.com/WOFF. That's WOFF. Get your championship swag. All of it that we earn from this direct link goes directly towards us supporting women in sports. This has been your DFS Showdown breakdown of the Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. You can find all of the divisional round breakdowns here on Club Fantasy YouTube page, as well as our DFS podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. He is Austin at Austin_FFL. I am Josh at the One Hudsonian. We will see you for the next video.